Level 1. The Anomaly. You're threading a fuel line through a rad-scarred manufactorum on Griffin 4 when the biometric scanner built into the doorframe locks the bulkhead behind you for no reason you can identify. Nobody tells you why. A servitor escort arrives within the hour, and it isn't until a woman in crimson robes steps into your quarters that you understand this wasn't a malfunction. She's Legio Astorum, and she doesn't ask permission before pressing a cold diagnostic stud against your temple. The reading makes her exhale, quiet and controlled, the way people exhale when a search that's lasted years finally ends. You don't know yet that your neural resonance sits in a band so rare the Collegia only finds one candidate per world per generation, if that. She tells you plainly, without ceremony, that you have until dawn to say your goodbyes, because by dawn tomorrow you belong to a forge that doesn't return what it takes. Your foreman doesn't argue when the transfer papers arrive. He simply looks at you the way a man looks at someone already gone, and hands you back half a shift's pay you never earned, as if it might matter where you're going. You spend your last night walking the gantries you've walked for 9 years, memorizing them the way you'd memorize a face you suspect you'll never see again. And somewhere before sunrise you stop being frightened and start being simply resigned, which frightens you more. Level 2. The Trial. The Academy sits carved into a mountain that predates the Imperium's arrival on this world. And the first thing your instructors teach you is that fear is a diagnostic tool, not a weakness, because a candidate who feels nothing in the simulators is a candidate who won't feel the manifold's warning signs either. The cognitive rigs strip you down to something raw within the first week. Borrowed fragments of a titan's temperament flooding a mind that was never built to hold them. Hunger and old grief and a fury with no clean object. 2/3 of your intake washes out before the second month, and washing out here doesn't mean going home. It means reassignment to duties nobody explains and nobody asks about twice. A boy from the Habstacks near your own, Idrin, who'd shared his ration bar with you on the transport in without being asked, stops responding to his name on the 9th day of simulator work. He's alive. He simply isn't reachable anymore behind whatever the rig left open inside him, and the instructors move him out before you finish your shift, filed under a designation you're told plainly not to ask about. You understand, somewhere around then, that this place isn't measuring courage. It's measuring whether your mind has the architecture to survive finding out, and courage has nothing to do with architecture. Level 3. Moderatus. Your first posting seats you inside a warhound called Iron Requiem, on the Auspex relay under a Princeps who's crewed this specific engine for longer than your entire life has existed. The link at your rank is thin, a shallow current rather than a flood, enough to feel the Titan's mood shift through the deck plating without drowning in it. You learn the difference between the engine being merely irritable and the engine being genuinely dangerous within your first fortnight, because getting that distinction wrong once is the only lesson some Moderati ever get. The rest of the crew keeps you at arm's length, not from cruelty, but from a hard-earned caution, having watched too many promising newcomers fail the manifold or fail each other before either was fully trusted. You spend 2 months quietly auditioning for a family that hasn't invited you in yet, and the invitation, when it comes, arrives as an old hand named Vesic showing you an unlisted diagnostic shortcut that isn't written in any manual, which means more to you than any commendation the Academy ever offered. 3 months into your posting, a void shield fails mid-engagement during an ambush that catches Iron Requiem's flank exposed to weapons batteries it should never have walked near. You reroute a coupling you were shown exactly once, buying 6 seconds that keep the leg actuators intact, and your Princeps doesn't thank you afterwards so much as she simply starts speaking to you like someone worth keeping alive. Level 4. The Binding. Iron Requiem loses its Princeps 14 months later. Not to enemy fire, but to a hemorrhage the manifold has been quietly cultivating in her for decades. The slow toll every full bond eventually demands. There's no spare Princeps to spare for an engine this valuable on short notice. And the ship's senior engineer makes the case, over 2 more senior Moderati who don't hide their resentment well, that your psychological profile makes you the crew most likely to survive the attempt. You find out later he's been compiling that profile on all 3 of you since the day you came aboard, and hearing your own mind described back to you in that kind of clinical detail unsettles you almost as much as the binding itself. Nothing in the Academy's simulators prepares you for a manifold opening all the way. your own thoughts suddenly sharing space with something ancient and only partially sane. Centuries of war folded into a temperament that doesn't recognize the boundary between itself and you. Two tech priests stand at the emergency disconnect the entire time, because a candidate who can't find that boundary doesn't come back as anyone recognizable. You find it barely, some stubborn scrap of yourself refusing to dissolve even while the rest of you drowns in something vastly larger. When you take your first step in command, the ground shakes and it feels disturbingly like the most natural thing you've ever done. Level 5, Princeps. Command changes what pain means at a level no simulator could have honestly modeled. A lance strikes scores Iron Requiem shoulder during your third campaign, and you feel it the way you'd feel a burn on your own arm. Sharp and specific, impossible to separate from your own body no matter how many warnings you were given in advance. When the engagement ends with the enemy line broken, the elation flooding through you afterward isn't entirely yours either. And most days you've stopped being able to say for certain which parts of your temperament are still purely human. Your 3 Moderati become the closest thing to family your life has left room for, their judgment trusted with decisions that could level a city block if any of you called it wrong. You learn each of their instincts the way you once learned Iron Requiems, correcting and trusting in roughly equal measure. And a crew that survives its first true campaign together tends to stay together for decades afterward. Reassignment requests quietly filed by officers who understand what that trust costs to rebuild from nothing. Off duty, you catch yourself still hearing the engine's idle hum somewhere behind your own thoughts, and the silence during maintenance cycles has started to feel less like relief and more like a loneliness you're not fully comfortable admitting to anyone outside the crew. Level 6, Princeps SENIORIS. Command of a maniple arrives after a decade in which Iron Requiem survival rate quietly outpaces engines crewed by Princeps twice your seniority, and the promotion hands you 4 more god engines whose crews now answer to your judgment instead of just your own. Holding 5 separate machine temperaments in your attention at once means learning each one the way you once learned your own crew. A reaver that runs hot and eager and needs reining in before every engagement. A warhound so old its caution borders on paranoia, the kind that saved its Princeps more than once. You realize within the first month that commanding a maniple has less to do with soldiers and more to do with keeping peace among 5 very old, very powerful relatives who remember wars you weren't alive for. Your first real loss under this rank isn't a defeat so much as arithmetic. Ordering a reaver and its crew into a fire lane to buy the rest of the maniple room to flank a fortified line. Its Princeps doesn't argue the order over the shared Vox. He simply walks his engine forward and dies with 2 of his crew in a strike that levels the position 30 seconds later. You attend the memorial rites yourself, because a maniple leader who can't sit with what an order like that costs has no business giving another one. And the Legion doesn't rebuild a lost Titan quickly enough for that lesson to ever stop mattering. Level 7, Grandmaster. The Legion's ruling council offers you the whole Legio after its previous Grandmaster falls, defending a forge complex the post-battle accounting shows was worth less than the 2 warlords lost holding it. You inherit 50-odd operational engines, a generation's worth of honor debts, and a direct line to the forge world's ruling magi that no ordinary officer, however senior, is permitted to interrupt. War stops being something you feel through a single manifold and becomes something you coordinate across dozens of them, reading reports from Princeps scattered across a war zone, and weighing which sectors are worth engines that can't be replaced within a lifetime. An Astra Militarum general demands Legion support for an offensive he insists is critical, and you refuse him twice before the Fabricator General's own authorization finally clears, because Titans answer to the Mechanicus alone, and a Grandmaster who forgets that under pressure doesn't stay Grandmaster. A rival Legio's maniple leader, temporarily attached for a joint operation, challenges your tactical call in front of both formations' assembled Princeps, arguing your caution has cost the offensive its momentum. You let him finish before answering, then remind him, calmly, exactly how many engines his own Legio has lost this century to commanders who mistook momentum for strategy, and how few yours has. He doesn't apologize. He also doesn't repeat the challenge. You still bind to Iron Requiem for major engagements because a Grandmaster who stops piloting loses the one thing that earned the other Princeps respect in the first place, And there's a particular satisfaction in feeling 50 Engine's worth of collective purpose organize itself around a plan that started as scratch notes in your own quarters. Level 8, the Machine Spirit. You've bound to Iron Requiem longer than any Princeps in its recorded service by the time your own body starts failing the way your predecessors finally did. Decades of manifold strain settling into a nervous system never designed to carry this much of another mind alongside its own. The engine seers who've served under you for 40 years don't discuss the prognosis aloud, but you notice the particular gentleness that's crept into how they address you now. The same gentleness you once used with Princeps you were quietly preparing to lose. You spend your last lucid months training your own replacement the way Vesic once trained you, correcting without raising your voice because the habit outlasted the reasons you first learned it. She's talented in ways that remind you, uncomfortably, of yourself at her age, and there's a particular grief in recognizing your own younger stubbornness in someone else's face, knowing you won't be present for most of what it becomes. What survives you isn't only a service record. Titans grow their own minds across centuries of use, layering the temperament of every Princeps who ever wore their manifold into something the Mechanicus itself only partially understands. And somewhere in Iron Requiem's slowly deepening machine spirit, a fragment of exactly how you fought, how you grieved lost engines, how you refused to spend a single Titan carelessly, will still be walking to war long after your own name has faded from anything but a maintenance log. The next Princeps who binds to this engine will never know your face. They'll simply find in the machine's oldest instincts a caution and a fury that are quietly, permanently yours. If this saga was worth your time, hit like and subscribe for the next one.